Our speakers today are Paul Milosevsky-Reed from the Regulatory Services Partnership and his colleague Heather Bailey, and then Sarah Xavier from the Council's Future Merton team. So welcome everyone. Today's session, I think oh gosh, it's terrible times. I really feel for you in this category of what's known as close contact businesses. So let's see what Paul has to say, and we can then take your Q&As, and that's it for today. So it's a very focused session. So Paul, I'm going to hand straight over to you and ask you to take us through where we are on building consumer confidence. I think that hopefully the government is taking into consideration when they are looking at opening therapy, fitness, swimming pools, spas, nail, beauty, that whole raft of businesses that still aren't able to open. So welcome, Paul and Heather. Are you speaking in turn, Paul, or how's it working?
Yeah, I'll be covering a lot of the content, and then my colleague Heather will touch on something in terms of RIDDOR, which is important to consider, and then we'll open up the Q&A to businesses.
Lovely. Thank you.
Okay, so not everybody will have come across the RSP before. We are council owned. We cover the 3 boroughs, Merton, Wandsworth, Richmond, and it includes all the services that you interact with, not just for COVID compliance, but all the kind of range of regulations that are dealt with at a local level. So licensing, environmental health, trading standards, pollution, pest control. So we've been advising tens of thousands of businesses, obviously, over the years, and in the last 3 months, we have been pretty much 100% in doing COVID compliance work. So going out, doing kind of drive-bys, checking up in shops, dealing with concerns, queries from businesses as different sectors have opened up. So just to kind of put your mind at rest a bit, because there's a perception among some businesses that we are the business police. That very much isn't the case. We are kind of in the middle. We have the laws. We are there just to initially advise businesses to help you guys get things right. And obviously enforcement has a role, but that is really reserved for those businesses who clearly aren't taking all reasonable steps to do their part. So let's get the disclaimer up front. This is obviously fast moving for everybody. We don't get any advance notice of the regulations or special guidance on how to interpret them. We find out about the government guidance when industry finds out about it. So it has been constant catch up over the last few months, getting to grips with these new rules. And as you know yourself, it feels like it's constantly changing every other week. So I'll be talking about a lot of things. We're talking about risk assessments, lots of steps that you guys need to take to look after yourselves, your staff, your customers. I think it's important to give some context because the information, is constantly changing. The science, what we know about the virus and how it spread has constantly changed as more and more data comes in from across the world. So let's just look at what we know currently, and that hopefully will then make some sense in what government and the guidance is asking you to do. So this is, it's an airborne virus. Every time we talk, breathe, cough, sneeze, we're releasing thousands of droplets into the air. If you have the virus is contained within those tiny water droplets. These droplets can just suspend in the air for about a quarter of an hour, so it's quite a significant amount of time. The virus is typically spread in enclosed indoor spaces where there isn't great ventilation, where people are working together or being around each other for a long period of time. Out of a case of around 7,300 cases of people that caught the virus, only 1 was connected with outdoor transmission. Which is why you see this kind of push from government around this al fresco trading. Let's get more and more people outside. It's because of that. And you will obviously appreciate there's been this change from 2 meters to 1 meter. There's a little bit of confusion around that. There was a lot of fight back from the scientists saying it's too much risk. Just to kind of give some clarity around that, it's estimated that when you're 1 meter away, you can be up to 10 times greater risk of transmitting the virus versus 2 meters away. So government isn't saying 1 meter is suddenly safe. Everybody still needs to respect the 2 meter rule. However, it was recognized that that isn't workable for lots of industry, including the pubs, restaurants, including spas, hairdressers, etc. It's just simply not manageable to keep 2 meters apart. So this guidance, this policy 1 meter plus is really trying to find a middle ground between keeping everybody safe and allowing businesses like yourselves to operate in a way as long as other measures are being taken into consideration. The other thing, to give a bit of context, the majority of people, around about 60% of those with the virus, don't display any symptoms. So you're not going to necessarily know because somebody's coughing, sneezing, high temperature, that they have the virus. They may have no idea, and so those are the people who are working, shopping as normal, and that is why it's so critical that your policies around social distancing, protection measures are implemented. Yeah. So what must you do as a business? Well, every business has always had to do risk assessment, even before COVID came along. COVID is just one of numerous risks that you need to consider as a business. It's obviously a very critical risk at the moment, but it is one of many you need to think about. And as part of pooling together a risk assessment, what government have done is they have brought the scientists, your industry, trade associations, experts who know how you operate. All of those people have got around a table to create this sector-specific guidance. So every sector has their own guidance, which is unique to yourselves. All of them talk about risk assessment, but obviously risk assessment will be very different depending on the kind of business, services, goods you sell, and how you work. So the first thing to do is, if you haven't done a risk assessment already, you've got to do it. If you've done a risk assessment, but it hasn't been in concert with looking at the government's close contact services guidance, which just came out last week, you have to have a look at that. We're often asked, have you got a checklist? Well, there is no kind of one size fits all. The risk assessment that a small hairdresser has to do will be slightly different to the one that a large hairdresser has to do, because it's all about how many staff you have, how good is the ventilation, how much distance can staff keep from each other, how can you configure the seating in the space that you have. So there is no kind of one size fits all, even for all hairdressers. But what there is the government guidance gets you to think about what are considered to be those high risk elements. So it gets you thinking through the process in a step-by-step way, so you can apply that to your own business and your own personal circumstances to assess the risks that are applicable to the way that you work. So you've got the government guidance. You've also got guidance that's come out from trade associations. So after we finish this webinar, obviously we can't go through the guidance in great detail. I'm going to highlight some key points, and after the webinar, we will circulate the link to the government's own close contact guidance, and where certain trade associations have their own guidance, you'll get those links. So for example, for hairdressers, your trade association has done a set of FAQs. So it goes into slightly more detail of things that are quite specific to hairdressers, as opposed to the range of other close contact services that are out there. The close contact service guidance is for any business where you need to contact customers. You can't keep that separation. So spas, hairdressers, beauticians, tattooists, masseuse, hair, dress fitters. Covers a lots of different kinds of services. Now, many of those services have been asked to still remain closed because government considers them to be particularly high risk. Barbers have been allowed to open. Now, even if you're not a service that has been given permission to open up, you should still look at the close contact guidance. You've got a bit more time to try and implement the guidance and make certain changes within your premise. It's perhaps worth kind of reiterating that, there is a lot that you're being asked to do. Some of these things are not easy, they're not always practical, there is an expense involved. It's worth bearing in mind, nobody knows when the virus will go away. The best kind of science estimates is we might have several waves. If there's an antibody, we're looking at summer next year. So, nobody can tell for sure, but they're thinking for, many months, 6 months, maybe up to a year, this is going to be the way that we're operating. So these kind of measures that are being asked are something that's considered to be long term. So it is an initial expense, but it's not something that you will go back to normal within a few months. So it is worth investing in getting this right now. Clearly, that's of benefit to yourself. You want to keep those measures are in place to keep your staff safe, so they're not sick, which would obviously could make it difficult for you to trade. You obviously want to keep your customers safe because that is your income. You want them to keep coming back. You want those customers, one, to feel confident to come back initially, and I'm going to touch on things to think about in that regard. And when they have visited, making sure that they walk away feeling that you considered their safety. They felt safe, they felt happy coming back to you again. Okay, so I said there's this push to move business outdoors. So think about that in terms of customer queues, seating, customer waiting areas. Some businesses have very small waiting areas. You need to think as much as possible. How do you move that side of the business outside? That may be talking to your neighboring businesses. You might have little or no pavement space. Talk to your neighbors. They may have forecourt space. Work with each other to make this workable. There is something called a new pavement license that's been introduced. Unfortunately, that isn't looking to be available till about the 23rd of July. So, we feel your frustration. Ideally, that would have been set and ready to go as soon as businesses had permission to reopen. So there is a delay there. That is a fast track process, though. It used to be you need a month consultation period, but now it's 7 days to consult with residents. I just remind everybody that's not muted, please mute if you're not speaking. Thanks a lot. Please be kind of rest assured that and this is regulators, this is police, this is councillors, all the way to the top in local government and all the way up to the cabinet office. Everybody wants this to work. We want businesses to open as quickly as possible and as safely as possible. So you might get, we are expecting, as more and more business goes outside, things work in a different way. We are going to get some residents complaining about noise and not happy with the way things are. Those will be dealt with in a very pragmatic approach. The council kind of response will be very different to what it may have been in years gone by. Whereas you may have had problems with serial complaints because of issues. Obviously, you're not pubs, you're not going to have issues of antisocial behaviour, but this covers everything like air conditioning units that might be noisy when you switch it on. It could be a range of things that disrupt the neighbourhood. We will be firmly pro-business. Clearly, we don't want upset residents. We will work with you as much as possible to support you and find kind of solutions to any of those problems that may come up. But please kind of put your mind at rest that we are there to help you. So before you open, come to us. You know, if there's any part of the government guidance that isn't clear, come to us and we'll give that clarity. That should be your first step, though. Before you need to go anywhere else for advice, just go through that government sector guidance, and can I just highlight it's ideal if you download it. The reason being is that the download version, each section of advice, they then give a checklist. So it allows you to just kind of go through that and ensure yourself you have considered each of those little steps within each element of the guidance. That isn't visible when you just look at the online version of the guidance. So pushing things outdoors, that is clearly not possible for every kind of business. So we need to think about how to reduce the risk indoors to minimize transmission. Now, for months, all we've heard about is hand washing, lots more cleaning. That has been kind of pushed out. We've heard that for a few months in the media and a lot of the guidance. But this is an airborne virus, yeah? And I mentioned it can circulate in the air for a good, more than 10 minutes. So how do we reduce that? You need to be having good ventilation. So keep open your doors, your windows. You want to do everything you can to keep the air free flowing, to avoid stagnant air as much as possible. Thinking along those lines, check your air conditioning unit. A poor air conditioning unit could be a risk to those seated near it. You need to make sure that your filtration is in top shape. Maintain indoor humidity levels around about 50%. I mentioned the virus is contained within little moisture droplets. The more moisture there is in the air, the quicker those droplets fall to the floor or surfaces. Now, when I started mentioning keep the humidity levels to that level, straight away people were saying, well, we're not going to turn our premise into a sauna, but surprisingly, I was a bit ignorant of this myself. Levels around London, anyways, are typically around about 40% plus. Just within my home now, it's 51% humidity. So 50% humidity is actually a comfortable level. However, depending on your premise and if you're heating the air, it's very easy for humidity to drop. When humidity lowers, the science tells us that a 1% drop in humidity can increase the number of COVID cases by 6%. You will be circulating some information after the webinar if you're interested in looking into the detail of why that is. Open blinds and shades to allow the sun in. So it's reported that 90% of the viruses are deactivated within 10 minutes when exposed to UV rays. Keep distances between different customers. So the guidance gives practical steps how to think about that. So it's not practical in a small hairdresser to keep your customers 2 meters apart. So you need to think of screens in between customers. You need to think about distance between staff and your customers. Again, 2 meters is impossible. This is why the guidance talks about visors, because as your staff breathe out, the droplets can fall to the air quickly. So you would have done your risk assessment, you finished that, you've done everything you can to keep staff and customers safe. That's the first step, though. Now we need to think about how do we communicate that message to your customers, yeah? Because we've had 3 months of fear, yeah? Lots of fear, people being told, stay away, stay indoors, stay away from each other. That hasn't gone away just because shops have got permission to open up. So you need to work really hard to counter that fear. Just to give you one example, 2,000 people were surveyed and 40% of them said they don't feel confident about their health and safety when returning to shops. A lot of people surveyed saying we're going to stick to online shopping for the foreseeable future. So it's going to take some time to get those people back. Now, we want them back in your shops as quick as possible. We want you guys to survive and get through this. So it's all about communicating to your customers that you have done everything you can to keep the premise safe. Yeah, there's a couple of things you can do in that regard. Government have a template staying COVID secure notice. So that is something, an A4 notice you can stick up in your shop windows. It is only A4, so it can get easily lost amongst promotional material, depending on how the setup of your shop window. So think about your own signage. You can do your own signage as big as you want. You can have banners, anything you want to say COVID secure, and you just kind of put some lines to the effect, we've done our risk assessment to keep you safe. Now, obviously, not everybody has a shop premise. You may be working from home, and obviously, it's almost it's that notice in your shop window is kind of too late for those customers who are still at home, still in two minds about coming out to barbers or other close contact businesses in the future. So you need to think of all the ways you communicate with your customers on your website, social media, email shots. Ideally, you would have a page on your website which talks about all the things you've done to keep people safe. So a kind of short summary about what you've done within your premise, the changes you've made. You will have done a risk assessment. This is quite a long 30 page document. Not the most interesting read. Many people won't want to read it, but publish that. Make it available to those customers who want that peace of mind. Because you'll know there's a huge difference between somebody having a little sign saying we've done a risk assessment, and they need to obviously take our word for that. That's very different from somebody seeing 20 pages of detailed risk assessment that's applicable to your premise. They will then be able to see this business has clearly thought through each and every single thing to minimize risk. Now, some customers will want to see this. They will want that level of peace of mind. And so make it available to those customers. Have that on your website. In any way that you contact customers, your social media, etc., have a link to that. Have any notices you put inside your premise around the waiting areas. Make sure that there's a link to that. So as customers are waiting before they've left, they will be able to have that information. So you know yourself all the ways that you interact with your customers. Think about it before they've come into your premise, during and afterwards. With that in mind, think about how you get feedback. So you, in your mind, you might have thought that you've done everything to keep your premise safe, but much of this is perception. Customers may walk out, they may wait in the waiting area, they don't feel safe, they walk away before they get the service, or they may have had the service and afterwards they didn't feel quite comfortable. So think about how can you encourage honest feedback from your customers. It may need to be anonymous, because if there's something that you're not getting quite right, you obviously want to change that for your next customer and have that opportunity to retain that particular customer that raised the point. So one of the other things that's quite unique to your sector and the likes of pubs and restaurants is record keeping. All customers, all businesses, rather close contact, you're expected to keep your customers' details for 21 days. The reasoning behind this is your sector has been seen as considered higher risk, not just because you're in closer contact with customers, but you're around those customers for a longer period of time. It's not like just popping into shop at a till and paying for goods as you do in a supermarket. You're around those people for a long time. There's a higher risk if there's a virus in the premise. This is the reasoning behind the 21 days. Records. This is to help the NHS track and trace. So if there is an outbreak in your premise, it's easy for government to track down who's come in the past few weeks. Now, not everybody's going to be happy about this. There is privacy conscious people out there. It's new, it's different. Some people might find it's a bit strange. Not everybody will have seen the media, the government briefings about this requirement, and clearly not everybody's customers aren't going to read business guidance that talks about this. So like anything, it's about communicating that in advance to your customers. So on your COVID page, mention that this is something that will be required. It's likely that you'll have fuller compliance if customers fully understand the reasoning. So explain the health necessity. This is about protecting them if there's an incident. Emphasize for the privacy conscious customer that it's only temporary. After 21 days, the information is discarded. The kind of information you're collecting is just name and phone number. Phone number rather than email, because it's a health and safety issue. We want to be able to contact that customer as soon as possible. If you get customers that are still reticent after you've mentioned those things, remind them that this isn't a company policy. This is a direction from government. It applies to every hairdresser, every close contact business, pubs, restaurants. This is something that all of those kind of businesses across England have been asked to do. So they will get used to this very quickly. When they're out at pubs, they're visiting hairdressers, all those kind of premises, they will get used to being asked for this information. On a practical level, how do you collect that information? Many of you already have booking, reservation software. As long as that takes the name and number, just continue using that. For those that have customers just coming in off the street, think about how you capture that details. You could still ask them to fill in that information. Whatever happens, you need to be able to check it. Don't just ask them to fill it in and assume it's done. You need to know yourself that the information's been captured before you conduct the service. I think that, so clarity on the 1 meter rule. The 1 meter, government's not saying suddenly 1 meter is safe. What they're saying is 1 meter plus. So if you have to interact with whether that's staff members being 1 meter away, or whether staff coming in contact with customers and you're going down from 2 to 1 meters, you have to have in place other measures to minimize the risk. So you'll see within the guidance, this is all kind of talked through in detail for staff and customers and how you interact with customers. So the guidance talks about things like the visors for staff, perspex between customers, ventilation levels, staff working back to back. So if you imagine in a hair salon, you might have chairs down one side, chairs down the other side, and the staff members may be less than 1 meter away, but they're back to back. So that is a measure that's been taken to minimize risk. So think about that. You really need to think about how you go through all the different processes in your business, all the way from staff coming in, staff and customers coming in. So for example, the guidance gets down to things like staff uniforms, making sure staff don't take uniforms home, making sure they're cleaned regularly. If staff are on public transport and now wearing their own face masks, having somewhere to put those masks aside before they wear the face coverings that are provided by the business. So I won't say everything's been thought of, but you'll see once you go through the guidance, it is really well thought out document, and you will find lots of answers to your questions in there. I think that might be all I'm going to touch on. Heather, would you like to come in and just talk about RIDDOR and anything else you think I might have missed?
Thank you. I'm Heather Bailey, Michael's Environmental Health and Trading Standards. So I've already answered one question with regards to the risk assessments. It was whether or not your risk assessment has to be documented. The requirement is that a risk assessment is only documented or written down if you've got 5 or more employees. I think in this case of COVID-19, for the purpose that you've got the template available, I think I would be writing my risk assessment down so that you then do have it available, as Paul's already suggested, available to your customers and members of staff if necessary. It's quite clear what you undertake a full risk assessment. I have also noted on the chat there are links available to the Health and Safety website for carrying out your assessment, and we'll provide those after this webinar. With regards to RIDDOR, if you haven't heard of RIDDOR, RIDDOR is the reporting of injuries and dangerous occurrences. And it's how you would have, before COVID-19, reported certain accidents and incidents that happen at work, and it's a legal requirement for you to do so in some circumstances. COVID-19 has now been put into the RID or regulations, but only when it is due to occupational exposure, and that's where the difficult part might be, and you might need some further guidance on that. There is plenty of information online, but I think where you might need additional advice maybe for particular circumstances that happen within your workplace, and you're not sure whether or not a case of COVID-19 needs to be reported under those regulations. And so in that case, it might be better to contact us directly to ask for advice. Okay. But I don't want to go too much into RIDOR at the moment, because you may not need, and it may be perfect when you've got so many other things to think about. But all the information is there, and if in doubt, just drop us an email and we'll advise you directly.
Thank you, Heather. That's lovely. And apologies to everyone. I need to keep on disappearing. So if I disappear at speed, Caroline will take over. But I've actually got the boiler man arrived to do my boiler. The gardeners have just arrived. They're out there with the strimmers. And I've got some furniture due to be delivered, and it's all happening in this hour. So many apologies, but that's why I'm having to dip in and out. But let's go straight to questions, because I think you will have quite a few questions. I can see we've had questions about risk assessments for businesses that are under 5, which Heather has clarified. It's only a legal requirement, isn't it, Heather, if you have more than 5, but it's good practice to do one, I think, and particularly with COVID, you should be doing one. Is that correct?
So you still have to carry out the risk assessment regardless of number of employees. The difference is only when it has to be written down, and that's where it becomes
okay.
5 employees.
Yeah. Good. Okay.
The other driver to writing it down is you're required to consult with your staff, and you want to do this. Forget a lot of this. You almost don't need to think about the law. It's about what helps your customers and gives staff confidence. Now, staff will have the same fears as many of us do, and if you can sit down with them and say, "This is what the kind of template risk assessment," ask for the input. They will feel a lot more confident that you're thinking about their safety. And clearly they're on the front line. They may consider things that you've missed as a manager or owner. So involve them as much as you can.
And there's an awful lot of advice and guidance around there. The Chartered Institute of Environmental Health have produced a document for hairdressers and salons, and that's been released this week. We can provide all these links after. And as Paul's already said, we've got these templates available. So writing down your risk assessment is going to be quite straightforward, and you're having to go through the same process anyway. And so as we've got all the templates and guidance available, I would strongly suggest that you write them down in this for COVID-19.
Right. Obviously, I missed some of the input, but I mean, the feedback that I've got for people that are running, particularly small business owners, it's about the confidence, isn't it? And it's about protecting yourself and protecting your clients. So I don't know if anyone's got any questions on that, because I know we've had this about changing areas, all those sorts of things before. This is your time to ask any of those questions. Anyone got any?
Okay, so I can see in the chat there's a couple of questions about, when can health clubs, etc., these other businesses that are being asked to stay closed, when can they reopen? Those decisions are being done at cabinet level. Boris, the PM, his cabinet are making those decisions in concert with scientists. At a local level, we have no input. Much of this is so fast moving. We are finding out when the Prime Minister or somebody comes on the news and says this is happening. You might get a few hours notice, but that is it. So we are not aware of any date for those. And just kind of reiterate, kind of mentioning or covering a concern that was raised on another webinar. I do appreciate that some of these, it's difficult to understand the reasoning behind it. A hairdresser gets closer to a customer than those in aerobics class would. Just so all I can say is, if you're one of the sectors that are still closed, you know, your trade association, your MPs are there to be your voice. They're there to kind of make your voice heard to the cabinet, to try and urge them to reopen your particular sector. In terms of aerobics classes, you know, you will be aware though gyms are closed, but the likes of fitness instructors are allowed to still continue operating outdoors. So many personal trainers have moved businesses outdoors. So if you have aerobics classes, it is an option to do that outdoors. Other people on a practical level have moved to doing those sessions as Zoom. Although you're not open, as I said at the beginning, you know, do still look at the close contact service guidance to get things in place as soon as you get permission to reopen. We were asked the other day, well, what if we reopen? You know, is this just government guidance to stay closed? So there's two things. You've got the legislation that's in place around when businesses and which businesses can be open or not. So that is like the law. And businesses that choose not to comply, there is, you know, the potential to be fined. And then you've got all the government guidance, which is talking about please do this, or we encourage you to do that, or you must do this. That said, some of the government guidance is kind of giving you practical measures that you can take to comply with your health and safety objectives. So hopefully I've answered that question. The other thing that's been mentioned is about increased costs to businesses. Obviously, you're having to fork out more money for PPE, social distancing, etc. You're being asked to do a lot of these things. They're included in information that will circulate will be all the links to the financial support that's available. So there's two types of financial support. There's the national government support. That's things like your furlough schemes and the £10,000 grant that was made available for businesses with a shop premise. You've then got alternative and kind of local financial support that's available. So links to both of those will be available to you. You've also got things like business interruption loans. So I'm willing to be corrected by Helen or Diane, but my take on this is that government are kind of pointing businesses towards those grants or those loans as the means to help you have the money to fund, either to survive or fund these extra things that you're having to purchase.
Well, I'd come straight back there, Paul. I think for small businesses, you know, I think they wouldn't want to be taking out loans just to be able to purchase the PPE and hygiene materials that they require. So I think what the issue is because they are having to buy those, they want to, well, they've got to decide whether they pass that cost on to their clients. And obviously at the same time, because they've gone so long without being able to service their clients, then there's nervousness about getting the clients back and whether they can put their prices up. So it's a chicken and egg, but that I think is the context of the way that I understand it. I personally think that consumers will expect that. I mean, everywhere we go, we see this massive investment. We were talking about restaurants yesterday, weren't we? They're all having to invest in all sorts of things, the signposting and the signage and the perspex and all of that. So there's an additional cost to all businesses at a time when businesses haven't been bringing in any money whatsoever, if they've been, you know, completely shut down. So I think that's a very big consideration for businesses. And it does really link in with the consumer confidence, because I think particularly in close contact businesses, the clients will want that confidence to know that they're going into a safer environment than, say, risking to sit at a table outside a takeaway shop and have a coffee because it's in the outdoors. That's my interpretation of it. So, you know, it's very difficult for these businesses. So that's my take. I don't know if any of the businesses there want to come on that, but I can see Rob is saying they've actually implemented a surcharge. That's interesting. Maybe do you want to say a bit more about that, Rob, and how you've done that?
Yes, I can do that. I mean, we've sat and worked out, going on government guidelines, what PPE and things that and dividers and things that we need to use. We have broken that down, certainly with the PPE, into a per customer cost. And we're lucky in the fact that our salon management system is able to implement a surcharge for each customer. So our surcharge is only going to be £3. I mean, most of our customers are coming in, they're looking at £100, £150, £200 bill at the end of their services. So a £3 surcharge is not a huge amount. We don't believe anyway, and from the contact we've had with our customers, they all seem to be fairly happy. Most of them are happy just to be coming back, and are happy to pay an extra £1, £2, £3 just to come back and see us and get their hair done. They've been waiting and clamoring for months. But yeah, I mean, it's something that we looked at initially, and it's something that we think is reasonable. I mean, I have been speaking to other people across, not just in Merton, but within the industry, who are worried about putting their charges up. Some people that I know haven't put their charges up for 5 years. And I said, you know, we are running a business, we're not running a charity, and people will expect to pay if they want to come in and access our services.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, yes, I do understand the concern that you've mentioned. It you know, having to implement all these new measures, there's costs attached, and I think that's quite a sensible practical step. Is separating it as a surcharge. Much of this is about how it's communicated, isn't it? And it's one thing just adding another £3-5 to your bill, and customers are left querying why it's more expensive. But explaining that and gives you an opportunity to then go on to say, look, have a look at our page here. This is all the things that we've done, and this is why we've added this £3. It would be nice, you know, and talking about your fear, you know, within the industry. Well, we don't want to put our prices up if next door is not putting theirs up. You know, I would hope, and this will be down to you businesses, you know, encourage your trade association to be recommending this kind of COVID secure surcharge. So there's a consistency, a level playing field across the industry. Because it's, you know, it isn't fair that, you know, businesses have been thrown into this situation, and nobody's, you know, this isn't anybody's fault. This is a situation we're all find ourselves in, and you know, we can there's lots that we can say about how things have been handled. Perhaps things should have been done in a slightly different way in terms of support for businesses, etc. But I think COVID Secure is a nice practical thing that you can do to highlight that you've done your risk assessment. And I think most customers will appreciate that there is quite a lot of cost and investment. It will be obvious when they come in, but again, just going back to what I say about advanced information, before the customers even walk in the door, to those who haven't got that stage, aren't confident about coming back, include that in the information that they will be given. Oh, another couple of things that I got asked by hairdressers the other day was, can we use hair dryers? That's okay. Can we cut beards? So the Hairdresser Federation is given some guidance around that. They've said, you know, trimming a beard is fine, but not shaving. You'll be aware that in the government guidance, it talks about high-risk zones. When staff and customers are face-to-face, that's a big no-no. You need to think about how you cut the beard, so you're doing it side-on. You know, this is kind of the level of detail the guidance gets down to. It really thinks through this process. So trimming beards okay, shaving off not, because of the risk of droplets from staff accidentally going in the air and affecting that customers. The other question was around what specific cleaning materials do we need to use? Just standard bleach is fine, and that will be included in the follow-up information that's sent round. The question we were asked also, have you got details of suppliers of anti-fogging, anti-misting visors? No, we don't have a list. However, I would suggest you look into the anti-misting sprays that's available for the scuba diving sector. That is reliable. Personally speaking, I've used them and find those are really helpful to stop fogging. There will be an FAQs that we send around, so some of these other queries will be picked up on that. So for those who are listening to this webinar at a later date, please do ensure that you also get access to the follow-up information, which goes into a lot more detail and FAQs in there as well. Can you use a fan? So the important thing to keep in mind indoors is how do you want to avoid stagnant air. So how do you, to the best of your ability, keep the air flowing freely through the premise? So this will differ completely on every business depending on your setup, your position of your building, lots of factors. Whatever works for you, which might be opening front and back windows and doors or side doors. So what helps the air flow freely? It might not be possible to open all doors and windows, or it might not allow the air to flow freely, and that's where a fan may be helpful. There isn't kind of official guidance on this, and I'm open to Heather seeing anything different, but bearing in mind that we want these droplets to pass to the floor as quick as possible, I would suggest that fans pointing downwards, so the air is being pushed down. Whatever you're doing, you don't want the same air to circulate. So those are the things that you need to keep in mind in terms of windows, doors, fans. What if your queue outdoors or your waiting area is affecting other people, other retailers' queues, or stops people walking past in a socially distanced manner? We're there to help you guys out. Obviously, the first step is talk to your neighbors. Now, as much as possible, try and work out ways that you can work together in terms of your queues, your waiting areas. The council is open to widening pavements where that's a necessity. So all I can say is contact us and we will help you. If you can't find an easy solution yourself, come to us and we will try to help you find a solution, and that may involve making some changes to how it looks outdoors. Any other queries, concerns?
Can I just ask one, Paul? I don't know whether you covered this, but say for small home-based businesses that maybe don't have waiting areas for sequential clients to sit, are there any recommendations on how they manage that? I know some are saying, for example, that they will phone a client when they're ready to receive them, and they have a gap between two of the clients, a sufficient gap, so there's not that, because quite often people run late, don't they, and things like that.
Sure. Okay, I didn't pick that up in the guidance, but I will relook at it. But just to give you an idea of what's happening in other businesses that kind of perhaps a similar line as that, you're talking about an enclosed or a smaller space. So all
hairdressers would apply, wouldn't they? That would apply to hairdressers, small hairdressing salons as well. Yeah.
So, for example, what dentists are doing, dentists is you usually have a small room, sometimes basements, not very good ventilation. They leave a 20-minute gap between customers where they open up all the windows and doors to ventilate that air. There is no hard and fast rule with any of this, because what you need to think about with all of this is, it's an airborne virus. So how can you make sure the air is clean for each customer? So that the guidance talks about various things like staggering staff patterns. So you don't want, say for example, your morning staff, somebody picks up a virus, you don't want those same staff mixing in with the evening shift. So you're minimizing risk amongst your staff. As staff are interacting with customers, whereas before maybe you had one person that does the blow dry, another member of staff does the tinting. As much as possible, you're trying to have one member of staff interact with that one customer. That's certainly, in an environment of a pub, you would have one person doing the drinks and the food. So think about that, minimizing staff contact as much as possible. Not easy, not practical for everything, You will have different experts within your premise. Maybe only one person can do certain aspects. But think about that. That's the level of detail you need to consider. Somebody's asking about, linking it with the ventilation around, ventilating the air in between customers. People are asking in the chat about air conditioning. There is guidance around air conditioning, which gets into the practicalities of various things, including making sure that the air conditioner has been serviced, that the filters are good or clean. Some air conditioners are on recirculate mode, where it's just cooling the same air in the building. You need to change that so the air is coming from outdoors. So we will circulate that guidance, but that's just kind of a couple of things to think about. The other question in the chat is access to toilet facilities. So you'll be aware, pubs, restaurants being open as a takeaway model, but the toilets have been typically closed. The firm push now is to open up toilets because of all the antisocial behaviour surrounded by that. Opening up toilets opens up another area of risk, obviously, and there is guidance again that goes into a lot of detail around that. But just a couple of things that you would consider are: can you keep the toilet doors open so people aren't touching those? There isn't a lot of contact with the door handles. You need to think about, after somebody's washed their hands, do they then need to touch the tap that might be contaminated? So they've just washed hands and now their hands are dirty again. So you might need to think about closing off some urinals so customers aren't standing so close together. So we've got some guidance that will give you some detailed advice around that. But generally speaking, please open up the toilets. Some boroughs even have things known as community toilet schemes, where you're actually encouraged by the council and you're paid some money by the council to open up your toilet facilities to the public at large. So do it, but do it safely by following the particular guidance that covers toilets.
And just come straight back there, Paul, because a lot of small businesses, they're running from home, or they may just have a small toilet in a small space where they're doing this service. So my understanding is at the moment they don't have to have the toilet accessible for customers. So in a home setting, if you're
Yes.
doing massage or anything else, physio from home,
Okay.
obviously you would be using the toilet within that home. So my understanding is from discussions is that you can say to people the toilet is not available unless it's absolutely. Yeah.
So I'm not sure there's a kind of legal requirement, other than I think with some restaurants who have
I get that. Yeah.
Yeah. But I don't think there's a legal requirement one way or another. There is a lot of guidance. So with all of this, every business has these obligations under health and safety laws, which essentially say you need to do everything that you can to keep staff safe and to keep your customers safe. And then there's a lot of guidance now that goes into a lot of detail of what government, scientists, industry experts think are practical measures to keep you safe. Now, within that guidance, I don't believe there's a direction one way or another, keep toilets open or not. It really comes down to each particular circumstances and style of business. So in a home business, if you have a tiny toilet that doesn't allow queues, it's difficult to get to and it causes safety implications, then the answer might be that it's not safe to open a toilet. And that's why it's got to come back to everything you do, including opening toilets, has to be in a safe way, not just about is there enough soap and are the toilet doors open, but everything down to if somebody's in, when that person exits, does that cause the next person in the queue to come in close contact with them? So you need to think about a lot of detail.
Oh yeah. That's helpful.
Heather, do you have anything to add to that?
Sorry, just unmuting myself. And if obviously we've encouraged the use of toilets in other public areas, but wherever you allow members of the public, either if you're running a business from home to use your toilet, one of the main controls of this virus is hygiene, cleaning and hand washing. And so you just need to ensure that that's done properly.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, any other questions coming forward? You could unmute yourself if you have a question, because I think we've covered all of those that are in the written chat.
Am I allowed to ask? Thank you.
Yes, of course.
So, very quick question. We're cleaning the floors. I'm just thinking, why are we cleaning the floors? But we're cleaning the floors between everybody that comes in and out of the building. So in our 15-minute gap. And I think the reason now you've explained it is that the virus is falling to the floor. Is it good practice we're mopping the floors like 10, 12 times a day?
Gosh. There's also, I'll just add to that, because there's this whole thing, isn't there, about people taking their shoes off as well, because they can bring the virus in on their shoes.
Yeah. So would you recommend, Paul, would you recommend that we keep doing that? It seems to be creating confidence that we are doing it.
Okay. So yes, as you've picked up, the droplets are in the air up to 10 odd minutes. We're trying to get them to drop to surfaces as quick as possible, which then kicks in the cleaning regime, the frequent cleaning regime. So there is, like all this, there is no hard and fast rule. There's not guidance that says you need to clean your floors 5 times, 10 times a day. It just says you need to clean surfaces frequently. So as regularly as you can with bleach and other alternatives like that, you're cleaning your surfaces so it minimizes the risks of staff, customers touching those surfaces and then passing that on, touching their face, nose, etc. I would suggest that you need to be cleaning worktop surfaces and those above waist level that are going to be touched a lot more often. I would say you need to be cleaning those a lot more frequently than the floor. Bearing in mind what we said about how it's how it is transmitted, and also a key thing about risk is what is the likelihood of a particular action happening? What is the likelihood of somebody touching the floors? Well, people have children, and we know what children are like. They're all over floors, touching, playing on toys. If somebody comes into a hairdresser with their kids, which it may not be an option for them to stay at home, they don't have childcare, then the children will be touching floors, and then they will be touching the other surfaces, your worktops, etc. Yeah. No matter how much the staff or parent may try to avoid that happening, that is a risk. You can maybe think of 10 other risks when you think through the kind of people that are going to walk through your door and the kind of things that could occur. So certainly it's not a bad thing, but just keep in mind what I'm saying about with everything you're doing, you're thinking through what could happen and what is the likelihood of that could happen, and that will determine what you should do, whether it's cleaning or visors, and the frequency that you change certain things, such as changing the clothing that staff are wearing, changing visors, cleaning visors. There is a lot to consider. I'm not, by no means is any of this easy. It's all new to a lot of us, and this is why I would say, Luke, please do, as much as possible, follow all the government guidance. If there's something in there that isn't making much sense, or you question, well, it's saying I should do this frequently, or I should make my staff do that. If something doesn't make sense and that's causing you to not do that, follow that bit of guidance, give us a call and we will try to give the reasoning behind it, because we want you guys to get this right, and it's important for you to understand why you're doing certain things. So that's part of the webinars that we're doing. We also have staff doing kind of drive-bys, doing leaflet drops. Some of our staff are going out in PPE and having these kind of conversations face to face. The RSP is here to help you, one, understand the guidance if you need that understanding or clarity, and two, we will help you as much as we can in drawing up risk assessments or improving the current risk assessments you have. We can't get out to everybody. We have a fixed number of staff. As you can imagine, we operate across 3 boroughs. All the pubs, restaurants, hospitality industry, and still some high street shops are coming to us with queries and concerns. But we're there to support you guys as much as we can. This is our #1 focus for the foreseeable future. Something else has just cropped up in my mind while I've been talking. I've mentioned that the virus can be passed out by customer staff just by talking. One of the things you'll see in the guidance that it may not make a lot of sense is you're being asked to keep music levels to a very minimum. The reason being is that if music is loud, or even any music, it causes people to have to speak louder to talk over the music, and that has a domino effect, doesn't it? Certain customers start talking, the other customers around them have to talk louder to be heard over the existing customers. When people talk louder, it causes more of the virus particles to spread. Just a single minute of loud speaking can generate at least 1,000 virus-containing droplets. So that's what the scientists tell us. This is why you need to keep sound levels to a minimum. You definitely don't want to have sports broadcasts, because we know what happens if our team scores. People get excited. Even if they're sitting down there getting their hair done, they will speak out loudly and cheer. So the other thing you need to think about is, hairdressing sector is renowned for hairdressers talking to their customers a lot. They need to be very mindful when we're not asking everybody to stay silent, but you need to be mindful of that talking can help spread the virus, and keeping levels to a minimum as far as possible.
And finally, Paul, it is a question. You've obviously set out that you really are in here to help and to support businesses to get their heads around this and operate safely. So will inspections still be going on? Can businesses expect those?
So this is most of our time is spent dealing with inquiries and concerns. So there's a lot of reactive work going on. We have a couple of officers per borough whose job it is to be going around dropping leaflets and having conversations with businesses. So you may see those officers out and about. But don't wait for us to come by. We won't get around to everybody. Give us a call if you have concerns or queries. Those may be dealt with quite quickly and easy over the phone, or just by sending particular information through to you by email. Where it is necessary for us to come out, that is something that can be considered. But like every organization, we are under a lot of pressure and we're dealing with a lot of queries. So do be patient if you have to wait for an officer to come out to give that kind of face-to-face and in-depth risk assessment.
Yeah, thank you. Good. Okay, well, we are just gone 2 o'clock, so I think unless there's any final questions or points, we'll start to wrap up. Paul, yesterday we ran a similar webinar to this. So Paul sends a follow-up document, which I presume we'll have the same for this one, Paul. So that will come out to you, and there is a single point of contact into the Regulatory Services Partnership team for you to make that contact. So the offer is there to support you, help you, advise you. And I mean, the key thing is obviously to get that opening date. And as Paul says, I think some of the sectors are very well represented, others aren't. The beauty sector isn't necessarily well represented. It is important that the lobby goes forward. So we're obviously trying to do that through our networks, and I'm sure you are carrying on doing that through your own sector bodies and networks too. So I wish you well, seriously, very difficult times. I know you are desperate to open your businesses, and actually as a customer I want to be there and support you too. So fingers crossed that there is some very positive news in the weeks ahead. So I'm going to say a big thank you to Paul and Heather for giving us that information. We will send it out to you. We obviously are carrying on with these webinars on different themes, and we'll be back in touch soon. So all the best for now, and we'll see you all soon. Thank you.